Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So we last left off in the bab or the fasl of dihar. And dihar is, and basically it's taken from like zahara, which is it's basically when it's what the Arabs used to do as a form of punishment, as a form of punishment for their wives when they would get upset at them and whatnot. And we talked about in the last chapter, we talked about like the people who swear that they're not going to they're not going to have intercourse with their wives. So that's one way of like harming their wives by making them be in a relationship without getting the actual benefits of it. So that's one way of harming them. And another way, even that's like that, is doing dihar, which is basically when he says here, he says, وَالدِّهَارُ أَن يَقُولَ الرَّجُلُ لِزَوْجَتِهِ أَنْتِ عَلَيَّ كَظَهْرِ أُمِّي. And so it was something the Arabs would do. They would say that saying to their wife, you are to me like my wife's back, or like my mother's back. So he says to his wife, you're to me like my mother's back. And so this, of course, is nasty. Like it's a nasty tashbih, like likening a person's a wife to his mother. Like, and this is a way that they used to actually they would do divorce back in the day. They would divorce in this way, which is nasty, but it's not like a clear divorce at the same time. It's kind of blurry, because it's not like him saying talaq, but rather he's saying that she is like that. So when this happened in Islam, like Islam a lot of times would take what was there previously, what was from the Adat al-Arab, like what they used to do, it would take that and put it into it, give it like the proper response. And so is this dihar? Is this similar to like talaq? As we talked about in talaq, you can have a talaq which is kinaya, which is it's not sarih, so you're not saying that you're divorcing her, but you're saying the meaning of that, and you mean the meaning, but you're not using the actual word. So you're saying the meaning of something that could entail either divorce or something else. And so it could be this or that. And so the har could be, in a sense, it could be like a talaq that is kinaya. So like when he says that you are to me like my mother's back, maybe he means by this like you're no longer my wife. Or maybe he means that this is just like a punishment to her, and also that he's not going to treat her like that, and he treats her like this. It's not like in an unloving manner and whatnot. And so, so he says this here, and so this is one of the ways that they would do talaq, but it wasn't necessarily clear in that. So it could have been kinaya and whatnot. So he's going to talk about this. So when Abu Shujaa, he gives the definition of dihar, and he says it's for a man to say to his wife that you are to me like my mother's back. And of course the back is used because this is like from a man with his wife, like this would be like the way that he writes. And so then he went like markub. And so then he says here, فَإِذَا قَالَ لَهَا ذَلِكَ وَلَمْ يَتْبِعْهُ بِالطَّلَاقِ صَارَ عَائِدًا. And so he says here, now if the person, he says this to his wife, and then right after that, he doesn't clear it up that what he meant by this is talaq, in this case, and then he's going to be considered عَائِدًا. ثُمَّ يَعُودُونَ لِمَا قَالُوا. And this is what Allah says in the Quran. الَّذِينَ يُظَاهِرُونَ مِنْكُمْ مِنْ نِسَائِهِمْ مَا هُنَّ أُمَّهَاتِهِمْ. And so Allah says the people that they do this dihar, like they say this statement, and then Allah says that these people, of course, these wives are not their mothers. إِنْ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ إِلَّا اللَّائِي وَلَدْنَهُمْ. And then Allah says that their mothers, the only mother that they have is the one that bore them, the one that actually gave birth to them. He says, وَإِنَّهُمْ لَيَقُولُونَ مُنْكَرًا مِنَ الْقَوْلِ وَزُورًا. That Allah says that they are saying, what they're saying is munkar, like something that's very terrible for them to say, مِنَ الْقَوْلِ, from something that they say, وَزُورًا. And that is something that's very like it's very like zur is like it's something that's very batil, like it's something that is incorrect completely, and it's a terrible thing to say. وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَعَفُوٌّ غَفُورٌ. And that Allah is forgiving, and like that He loves to show this forgivingness and overlooking of these things. And then He says after that, the people that say this ثُمَّ يَعُودُ لِمَا قَالُوا. And so then when Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ يُظَاهِرُونَ مِن نِسَائِهِمْ ثُمَّ يَعُودُونَ لِمَا قَالُوا, and then if they go back on what they said. And this is the understanding of the Shafi'is when they say يَعُودُونَ لِمَا قَالُوا. So when you have the aud here, and then lima qalu, this means he goes back on what he said. Like his word was one thing, and then he went against his word, which means that he didn't actually put this into place. So of course, if the person says that if this was talaq, and he said talaq right afterwards, and he made it clear that this is what he meant by saying this dihar. In this case, she gets this is talaq with kinaya. Now, of course, this is not a good way to say this whatsoever, but it's talaq, and it doesn't take the rest of the rulings here that would be specific for dihar. So if in this case, then he doesn't follow it up with talaq afterwards, and he leaves it open. In this case, then he's considered a'idah. And a'id, it means that he went against, he khalafa qawlahu, that he went against what he said. So if he doesn't follow it up with talaq, then by him being silent about it, he's basically saying that I want her to be my wife, and like that she is my wife. And so in this case, then the ruling applies to him, فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. And so then Allah says فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ, and then he also gives the kafara before he comes back to his wife and can enjoy her as a husband, enjoys his wife. So in this series it says, and so if he doesn't follow it up with talaq, صار عائدا, and so then he becomes a'id, and وَلَزِمَتْهُ الْكَفَّارَةِ, and that's what he says here. And then the kafara now is obligatory on him. Of course, if he goes back to his wife, he has to, before he can go back to touching his wife and doing what he does with his wife, then he needs to pay the kafara. And he'll talk about what this is here. And so he says here, وَالْكَفَّارَةُ إِتْقُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ. And so then he needs to free a believing slave, because Allah says فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. And so min qabli an yatamassa, and so that Allah says that he needs to free a slave. And what kind of slave is this? And we talked about in usul fiqh, we talked about al-mutlaq wal-muqayyad. Here it's mutlaq. He just says, Allah says فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. And so this is mutlaq. It doesn't say that it needs to be a mu'mina, but we take it from the other ones, the other rulings of when freeing a slave is mentioned in the kafara of someone who accidentally kills another believer. The kafara there is فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مُؤْمِنَةٍ. And so we take this mu'mina from over here and we put it over here. And this is what the Shafi'is did to see that فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ. And they say also mu'mina. And then also upon this, is like if you're freeing a slave, when you are doing something that's obligatory for you to do, you need to, if we were, we'll talk about this, but if we're doing udhiyah, or if someone promised to do something, when they do this kafara for this thing, or if they do udhiyah, it needs to be something that is free from major defects. So he says here, on top of that needs to be a believing slave, mu'mina, and then of course it's mu'mina because raqaba is the neck of a slave. And this is what the Arabs, they refer to the neck, and they mean the whole slave. It's not just the neck. Of course, if you talk about the neck, then this also includes the whole slave as well. And also he says salimatun min al-uyubi al-mudarra bil amali wal kasb. And so he says here, and then needs to be free from any defects that would affect in a negative way when it comes to the working of this slave. So say you have a slave that he's lame, he can't walk properly. In this case, that slave would not work for this. And also with kasb, and like that he can actually, this is something that he would normally be able to, this slave is not like insane or something of that sort, but he's actually has all of the normal things that someone would need when they think about a slave, without any of these major defects that would affect a slave if they were buying and selling, and that price that would be like a major handicap or something of that sort. And so then he says the next thing, of course. So these are extra conditions on there that aren't necessarily in the ayah, but they're brought out from other istidlal and looking into it from other evidences. He says فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ. And so he says here, and if he doesn't find a slave, if he doesn't have a slave and whatnot, then in this case, then he would fast 2 months mutatabi'aini. And so 2 months consecutively, and he can't break this consecutive thing. If he breaks it, then he has to start over from the beginning. And so, and this comes from the ayah, and of course all of this has to be done before he can come to his wife. And so, min qabli an yatamassa, and before they can, like tamassa, here it means like to go back and forth in touching, which is kinaya, and which is kinaya and jima', or intercourse. And so this is, so he would have to fast 2 months consecutively without any breaks. No breaks for any reason, unless like there's Ramadan. When Ramadan comes, okay, then he needs to fast Ramadan. He picks up right after it, and he continues where he left off in that case. And so this is one thing. And if he can't do this, say he can't do 2 months, he's physically unable, or it's going to be severely hard on him, that he's just it would be an extreme hardship. Of course, there's always going to be some type of hardship, but it's like extreme. If it's extreme in this case, then he can go to the next one, which is فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَإِطْعَامُ سِتِّينَ مِسْكِينًا. And then if he can't do this, then he needs to feed 60 he needs to feed 60 poor people in this case. And this would be that. And it needs to be, the number needs to be there. So it needs to be 60 different people that he feeds. And of course the feeding, whenever it's mentioned, like the Shafi'is, when they talk about the feeding, it needs to be a mud. It needs to be a mud for each one of them. And he says here, كُلُّ مِسْكِينٍ مُد. And so he says for every single miskin, there needs to be 1 mud. And a mud, as I mentioned before, is it's technically it'd be roughly it'd be like a handful. But this would be the mud that we talked about before, and I believe it's 1/5 of a gallon. I have to go back and check. But this is something that, or it'd be like around 300, sometimes they'll say 300 grams when it comes to a mud. And so this is roughly, like it'd be less, it'd be less than it'd be like a mud would be less than a kilo. Afwan, a mud would be less than a kilo of grain and whatnot, and it needs to be actual qut al-balad, as we talked about in the chapter of Siyam, and we also talked about this a little bit when we talked about the zakat al-fitr. We talked about this. And so then in this, he needs to give a mud for every single one of these. And he would give it to them not as cooked food, but as the mud in its solid state form of grain. And even like the Shafi'i madhab, they would say it shouldn't be in a processed form. Like it should be grain, it shouldn't be in a processed form. So if it was like in flour form, this wouldn't work. It needs to be actually in the actual grain itself. And so if it was rice, okay, rice is fine. Like there's no problem with that. But if it was like actual flour, then it wouldn't work. It has to be in its original form, so that person can choose whatever he wants to do with it. This is the way that they would say about it. And also the same thing with that it couldn't be like pasta. Say someone wants to give like pasta. This, of course, it's flour and whatnot, and this would not work. It needs to actually be actual grain that is considered qut, or like the staple food of the place that a person would be able to live off of. You all with me? I think my having a little bit of problems here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, all right. I'm gonna check something real quick.
Okay.
I think my Wi-Fi is a little funky because I'm out in the village.
Oh.
There we are. All right, you all hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. And so as we talked about here, so each one of them needs to have 1 mud, and that mud needs to be actual staple food that is in its raw form. It's not cooked or processed in any way, shape, or form. And of course, it's so that it's their property. They do whatever they want with it for these poor people. And then also he says. After that, to continue, he says, وَلَا يَحِلُّ لِلْمُظَاهِرِ وَطْءُهَا حَتَّى يُكَفِّرْ. And so, like, of course, he can't do any intercourse with her until he actually until he pays the kafara. So he's not able to pay this, and he's not able to fast. He can't pay it and he can't fast. Then it's a debt in his it's a debt like that he needs to pay, and he can't come to his wife until he pays this debt, even if he's poor. He still has to do one of these until that. So it's a very serious matter for someone. Of course, this was something that the Arabs, like, maybe we wouldn't think that this is something we would do per se, but this was something that the Arabs were in the habit of doing it, and it was a very hurtful thing to their women, that they would say this in this matter. And so this is why there's a particular punishment that's involved with that. Any questions before we move on to the next chapter? All right, inshallah. So the next chapter that we'll talk about is when it has to do. It's called a li'an or a mula'ana, which is a way of preventing. Of course, if someone was to find someone doing zina, if someone individually was to say, this person, I found so and so doing zina, and they were to say this by themselves, and they, without any other witnesses, they would be guilty of qadhf and qadhf, and they would be lashed. They'd be lashed for this thing, and there would also be something that would get rid of their adana, like their trustworthiness would no longer be accepted. So this would have we'll talk about this in the chapter at the end about qadhf and the had for qadhf, which is the punishment for slandering somebody with zina, saying that so and so slept around such and such. Like, this is a huge thing in Islam, and of course this is of the beauty of Islam, that this thing is given. That the people are given such a right that if somebody ever slanders them and says that they slept around and such, that this person is now guilty of qasf, and they are deserving. The person who said this, they're deserving of getting lashed. And so, if someone was, say someone was let's say like a husband or whatever, he actually found his wife with someone else, or he knew that this woman slept with someone else, and now she's pregnant from this other person. And so if she was pregnant with this other person, this child that normally would be considered his child, because he's the husband, the child of the wife is always going to be prescribed to the husband. In this case, there's going to be a bad thing between this child here will be pointed towards him, and it's not his, or he has extreme reason to believe that it's not his. Maybe he saw it personally, and so how is he supposed to say, oh, I know that this kid is not going to be mine, and also that my wife did such and such? How is he supposed to do this? And so this is where the mula'ana comes in, where this is a way for him if he does the qazf. So he says, I saw my wife do this, that, and the other. And then, so he says this, that he saw her doing this, that, and the other, and that the kid that she has is not mine. So he needs to negate this. If he does this, then if he does the mula'ana alongside of it, then it will get rid of the punishment that he will be exposed to normally. And then, and this stands in the place of having 4 witnesses seeing the actual act. It will stand in the place of that. Because normally for someone to say that so-and-so did zina, they have to have 4 eyewitnesses that saw the actual penetration. They saw this enter that. And they have to see this, and they all need to be trustworthy witnesses. So if you don't have this, what do you do? And if it's like a man and his wife that did this, in this case there would be the mula'ana as a cure to this problem. And so he brings up this, and he's going to give some of the ahkam revolving around this issue here. And so he says here, faslun, وَإِذَا رَمَى الرَّجُلُ زَوْجَتَهُ بِالزِّنَا فَعَلَيْهِ حَدُّ الْقَذْفِ. So he says, if this person, rama, they say rama, which is like rami, which is like, we'd say in English, normally say this, this is throwing. But of course, rama, bi, zina, and so this would be accusing of zina. So if a man accused his wife of zina, then upon him is the hadd al-qadhf. Then he's exposed to the hadd al-qadhf. And except, he says, illa an yuqim al-bayyina aw yula'in. And so he says, except if he gives the bayina, which of course here, like the bayina would having like the other witnesses. So if he had 3 other witnesses alongside of him when he does this, or if he had 4 witnesses and whatnot, in this case, he wouldn't have the hadd al-qadhf on him. But the other option, if he doesn't have this, which is, of course, this is very hard, and it's never, I don't think there's ever been a time in the history of Islam that anyone has ever come up with 4 witnesses on this. That have actually gone through, with the had for zina, and because of this. And so also he says, or yula'in, and so or he does the mula'ana or li'an, which is this, and this comes from the word lan, because of the saying which he will say here, because it includes the saying of lan, and so this was in the saying. So this is what the term of them going back and forth, mufa'ala, is like going back and forth. This is what is known with the sarf, the wazn of mufa'ala, which has the musharaka, like something going back and forth between 2 different people. And so then he says, how does he do this? He says, فَيَقُولَ عِنْدَ الْحَاكِمِ فِي الْجَامِعِ عِنْدَ الْمِنْبَرِ فِي جَمَاعَةٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ. And so he says all of these things. And look also the things he says. So he's going to say, and we'll talk about what he's going to say, but where does he say it? He says it in front of the hakim. The hakim is there, like the person who's ruling. The ruler, he says it in front of the ruler, fil jami', inside of the masjid. Ala al-minbar. He says in front of the minbar, or on the minbar itself. And fi jama'atin min an-nas, with a ton of people around him. So this is a big deal. Of course, this is not something they do in like a closed private setting where they do a mala'ana. No, it needs to be out in the open, in public. And this is a part to make sure that this person is not playing around. And that's a serious deal. And also this is like and open, like he's openly doing this in a place where everyone can see around him, and so it's a public affair. And so this is something that would scare someone from just like jumping into a mula'ana like haphazardly. So all of these extra things, like doing it in front of, inside of the masjid, normally someone inside the masjid, they're going to have a bit more taqwa and like a little bit more fear of Allah than if they were outside the masjid, on the minbar, even more so, with people all around them, even more so. So all of this is just tashdid, like it makes it very, 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 very serious affair. And so he says, and then what is he saying? And then the person would say, Ashhadu billahi inni lamina sadiqin. He says, I bear witness by Allah that I am of the people that speak truth. Fima ramaytu bihi zawjati fulanata min az-zina. Then he would say, in what I accused this woman, so and so, of zina, like my wife as so and so of zina, and he would say these things. And then, and of course, the way that he says it needs to be in Arabic too as well. This is something that the actual sigha needs to be said as is exactly, and you can't make any differences in here. Of course, like the woman's name goes in there, put that in there, but it would need to be the exact. They would need the actual be the exact name of the woman. Or it need to be the exact sigha, like this actual wording and phrasing needs to say it. So he'd say this, وَأَنَّ هَذَا الْوَلَدْ, and then he'd also add to it, وَأَنَّ هَذَا الْوَلَدْ, and this kid is مِنَ الزِّنَا وَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Then he says, and this kid is from zina, and it's not from me. And so he would say this 4 times. So he repeats this and saying 4 times, and then at the last time, the 5th time, وَيَقُولُ فِي الْمَرَّةِ الْخَامِسَةِ. And he says, then in the 5th time, بعد أن يعظه الحاكم, then the hakim, or like the person who is like the judge or qadi in this case, he's supposed to sternly warn this person in front of him and tell him, and fear Allah and don't say anything but what is the truth. And he, like they sometimes say, put his hand over his mouth and make sure that he understands this is a serious affair. This is not something at all that someone would be joking about. On the 5th time, and then the 5th time that he would say وَعَلَيَّ, and he would say this وَعَلَيَّ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ إِن كُنْتُ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. And then he would say this phrase that the la'an of Allah is upon him if he is of the people who are lying. And so this of course is a severe statement here, and this stands in the place of having 4 witnesses. Like, so this stands in the place of having 4 witnesses, him doing these 4 shahadats, and then at the end of it, claiming this upon himself, that that I will have the la'n, or like the curse, in which la'n itself means like being thrown away from the mercy of Allah. And so that he would have this if he is lying about this thing. And so, and then he says here, Abu Shujaa, he says, وَيَتَعَلَّقُ بِلِعَانِهِ خَمْسَةُ أَحْكَامٍ. He says there's 5 things that are connected with him doing this li'an. And he says the first of them is سُقُوطُ الْحَدِّ عَلَيْهِ عَنْهُ. So the had that he would normally get for qazf, which is like accusing someone of zina, this now has dropped. So that's the first thing that is no longer upon him. He's no longer subject to being lashed for saying that about his wife. The second thing, وُجُوبَ الْحَدِّ عَلَيْهَا. Then the had actually becomes obligatory on her for zina. Like this is not the had of qasr. The had of zina becomes obligatory on her, because he just stood, when he does the mula'ana, it stands in the place of 4 witnesses. And so then was zawal al-firash. And then also like the zawal al-firash, this, what he means by this is that kid is no longer like his nasab, or like his lineage is no longer pointed to this man. This kid that he did this from, this kid will no longer have he will not be associated as this man's son and this father, and this is not his father. And so that's what zawal al-firash, a lot of times they'll say firash, and what they're talking about is the bed, but because the kid would be born on the bed that this person is the owner of. And so in this case, this would no longer be to him. And so this is the third one here. When nafy al-walad, and this is and so then the walad is no longer from it. And the walad firash is that they would not be together anymore, like these people. And also he says with tahrim al-abad, and tahrim al-abad means that this man and the woman can never be together again, ever. Like this man and the woman, they can never be together. So maybe he makes up, he changes his mind about the woman, or he thinks that it's okay, that she did this, but he still did the mula'ana, and they can never be together. If he ever did the mula'ana on this person, you can't have two people that one of them is mal'un. Like one of these person is in a serious contempt, they can never be together again. So this is of the type of separation that is mu'abbad, but it's not something that would make them a mahram. And so like normally when we talk about a mahram, we'd say this is a person that is permanently impermissible for him to marry, with the exception of this. And this is the one exception from that. This is permanently, he's not allowed to marry this person ever. But also she's still ajnabiyah. And so she's not a mahram. And so these are the 5 ahkam. So that the had is dropped from him and it's placed on her. That's the second one. And then like the zawal al-firash, like this is no longer for them. Like this, the firash here, which is like the bed and whatnot, this would not be between them. Like they would not be considered for the kid would not be considered his. And also the nafi of the walad, and so the kid's not going to be his. Also the tahrim ala abad. So these are the 5 things here. And so then he says here, وَيَسْقُطُ الْحَدُّ عَنْهَا بِأَنْ تَلْعَنِيَا بِأَنْ تَلْتَنِيَا or تَلْتَعِنَا. And so when she does the li'an as well, this would drop the had from her if she does it. And so this is the way for her to get the had off of herself. If she didn't say anything, she would be subject to the punishment of zina. And so if she decided not to do this, then she would just take the rami, and so or rajam upon her. And so then like the had of zina. But if she wants to drop this from herself, then she would do this similar thing as well. And so then what she would say, fataqul. And so then she would say, Ashhadu billahi anna fulanan hada. And so it says that this person here, lamin al-kadibin, he's of the liars. Fima ramani bihi min az-zina, in what he's of the liars, in what he accused me of in regards to zina. And then she would say this arba marrat, and then wataqula, as like 4 times she would say this, and وَتَقُولُ فِي الْمَرَّةِ الْخَامِسَةِ. And then the 5th time she would say بَعْدَ أَنْ يَعْدَهَا الْحَاكِمِ. And then after the hakim, he's very severe, like I mentioned before, he's very severe for the person to say this this statement of that the la'an of Allah will be upon him. The same thing for her. He says he warns her and tells her to fear Allah, and that this is a grave matter to call upon this on yourself, and this and the adab. The adab at dunya is easier, like for someone to get punished in the dunya is much easier than for them to be punished in the afterlife. Those are the things that he should tell them as well. And so then she would say after this, as the 5th time, she would say this, and then at the end of it she would follow it up with وَعَلَيَّ غَضَبُ اللَّهِ إِن كَانَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ, and then may the anger or wrath of Allah be upon me if he was of the people speaking truth. And of course, this sigha, as I mentioned before, all of this has to be in Arabic in the exact way that it is, just with the name only. The name, like Fulan, you change this in the name, but the sigha needs to be exactly as it is, and it shouldn't be changed in any way, shape, or form. And then in this, and this is the way that she would drop the had that would be obligatory on her. It would drop. In this case, and she would have this. The kid would be her kid, and the kid would be with her, and then she would finish living out her life in the way that it is. But that kid would not be related to the man itself. And so, of course, this is a serious matter, and there's ahkam that revolves around it and whatnot. And this is the bab, which is called mula'ana. Any questions before we move on?
What if somebody was in a non-Muslim country? Is that something that could be done?
Yeah.
It has to be a Muslim country, yeah?
No, it doesn't have to be a Muslim country. You would go to all of these things in general. You would go to a faqih, someone who is a sheikh or a knowledgeable person, and he would do this for them. But the same rulings would apply. All the rulings would apply. This kid is no longer negated to them. They're never allowed to get married again. All these, and of course Muslims in a non-Muslim country, they still apply the shariah. And whatever they can, like when it comes to with their lives and whatnot, they apply the shariah. Of course, and not in some way that's going to create fitna, such as like carrying out hudud on people. But as far as the mula'ana, this can happen. Of course, the actual punishing with the had, this in and of itself, maybe this could create issues, depending if the people are okay with it. If the people, they do the tahkim to an individual, and they say rule with what Allah, rule between us with what Allah decreed. Then in this case, he should take the had, like especially if it's qadf, like but this is also something that could create problems. And of course, you never want to create greater problems than you're trying to fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, any other questions? All right. And so the next thing, and the wording zawal firash is like that the marriage is dissolved. That's what that means. And then the nafi al-walid is a separate thing there, just to be clear. All right, and so the next thing, the next chapter that he's going to go into, it has to do with when a woman is in her waiting period. It's called the iddah. And the iddah is the waiting period before when a woman's marriage ends, either by death or by divorce or by something of this matter. In this case, she has a waiting period before she can get remarried. And this waiting period is called the iddah. And the woman who's waiting, she's called the mu'taddah. This is what she's called, like the person who is, the woman who is on her waiting period, she's called the mu'taddah. And so this next chapter is going to talk about this waiting period and some of the rulings regarding the different types of iddah that there are and what kind of ahkam comes upon them. So Abu Shujaa, he says, Faslun, wal mu'taddatu ala darbaini. And so he says in the mu'tadda, there's two types. There's two types of ala darbain, two types. And he says, al-mutawaffan anha wa ghayru mutawaffan anha. And so one of them, mutawaffan anha, this is so you have this is a way of saying the woman who is widowed. So like tawaffa, it means like to take someone away. And so like normally this Allah huwa al-mutawaffi, Allah huwa al-mutawaffi. He's the one who takes the souls from the person and is like the one who brings and decrees death upon the people. And the mutawaffa is the one that has been taken, like whose soul has been taken from his body in death. And so he's the mutawaffa. And then mutawaffan anha with this connection of anha, this is the woman who has had her husband taken away from her. And so I hope that this is the maf'ulun. This is like a maf'ulun bihi, but it's different because it's like a maf'ulun anha. So it's like the maf'ulun bihi, but it's connected with an here, which means like that she is the one that her husband has been taken away. The mutawaffa is her husband, and anha is from her. So her husband has been taken away. This is what the word mutawaffan anha. This is what it means like in Arabic. And then also he says وَغَيْرُ مُتَوَفًّا عَنْهَا, and also like either a widow or other than that. So he breaks it into these two categories. Now he's going to talk about the first one, as far as the widowed woman. فَالْمُتَوَفَّى عَنْهَا إِنْ كَانَتْ حَامِلًا فَعِدَّتُهَا بِوَضْعِ الْحَمْلِ. So this is a key concept. The iddah for a pregnant woman, in all cases, the iddah for a pregnant woman is whenever she finishes whenever she gives birth. This is what he says by biwad'il hamil. This is whenever she gives birth, even if it's a stillbirth. Whenever she gives birth, this is the end of her iddah. So even if it was a day, like her husband passed away and the day after that she gives birth, she's done now. She's ready to get married right away. Like she's allowed to get married right away, because this is her iddah is just for that period of time. Until she has the actual childbirth. And the same thing, if it could be up to like 9 months. So her iddah could be 9 months. Maybe she just got pregnant and then her husband passed away. So then she has to wait all the way until she gives birth. After that, and then she can get married again. That's when her iddah ends. And then he says here, وَإِن كَانَتْ حَائِلًا فَعِدَّتُهَا أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرٍ. And so here he says, and if she was ha'il is the opposite of hamil. So hamil is pregnant. Ha'il, which is like something that stopped, or like that she doesn't have this. She's not pregnant. In this case, فَعِدَّتُهَا أَرْبَعَةُ أَشْهُرٍ. So 4 months. Her iddah is 4 months. وَعَشْرٍ. And this he uses the term that comes in the Quran, which is ashur ayyam, like 10 days. So 4 months, 10 days. This is what is prescribed for the woman who is not pregnant, and then her husband passes away. And then she needs to wait for this period of 4 months and 10 days before she gets married again. And also here he mentions after this for the other type. So he said there's 2 types. The other type, غَيْرَ الْمُتَوَفَّى عَنْهَا إِنْ كَانَتْ حَامِلًا فَعِدَّتُهَا بِوَضْعِ الْحَمْلِ. Same thing. If the woman who say she was divorced, then her iddah until the end of this is when she gives birth. This is the iddah for her. So it could be, like I said, it could be a day or half a day, or it could be like 9 months. However long it takes for her to give the birth, this is when her iddah ends. So of course, if this was a talaq raj'i, then this person could take her back anytime within the next 9 months. Like say until she gives birth, he could take her back. And if she gave birth, then he can't take her back after that. Except with a new nikah, assuming that he hasn't divorced her 3 times. And so here, and he says, in kanat ha'ilan, and if she's not pregnant in this case, then وَهِيَ مِنْ ذَوَاتِ الْحَيْضِ, and she's from the people who have periods, like she has a period that comes and goes. And then in this case, she has periods, even if it's sometimes a little inconsistent, as long as she does have periods. In this case, even if it's inconsistent, then her iddah is فَعِدَّتُهَا ثَلَاثَةُ قُرُوء. And then her iddah is ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوء. And a qur is the one of them, and quru is the plural of this. And some they would either say qur is one, or they would say qar. And most of it is like most of them, the mufassir, they would say that in the ayah when it comes ثلاثة quru, they would say it's like qur. Wallahu ta'ala alam. And so this is the single is qur, and then quru is the plural. And what is this meaning of the qur? And so the mufassirin, they have a big discussion of what is this a period of like this. They all agree that it has to do with haid, and it's a period. Like is it the period between haid, like between menstruation, or is it the actual menstruation itself? And the view of the Shafi'i madhab is he says here, وَهِيَ الْأَطْهَارِ. This is the actual period of purity between the 2 menstruations. So she needs to have a period of purity from the beginning to the end between all of these menstruations. So say we talked about in talaq that there's 2 different types of talaq. One is bid'i, and then the other one is Sunni. So if someone were to do bid'i, and so he divorces her in a time that he had jama'a fihi, and so like in one of these times of purity that he had intercourse with her, and that she would need to wait to complete a whole time of purity between the menses. And so this would delay her, and this is one of the things that we talked about. It's harmful for her because it delays her in that way. Aside from the fact that it's haram for him to do it in this time, and so she needs to have 3 of these times of purity between this. And once the 3 times of purity has ended, then after this, then she can get remarried. And this is also the time for him to take back his wife if he wants, assuming he hasn't divorced her more than 2 times. And so he says here, وَهِيَ الْأَطْهَارُ وَإِنْ كَانَتْ صَغِيرَةً أَوْ آيِسَةً فَعِدَّتُهَا 3 أشهر. And so he says here, and this is for, he said, and this is for the people that have haid. This was they have 3 times of purity. And if they don't have 3 times of purity between these things, what is there? Say that you have, he said, وَإِنْ كَانَتْ صَغِيرَةً. Maybe this is a young girl that has that doesn't have periods. She doesn't have periods. So she doesn't have periods, or ayisa, which is like a woman who has already gone through menopause. So of course she's not going to have any periods, and she's menopausal. Then what is her waiting period? Then it's 3 months. And so this would be 3 months. And of course, you would look at how many days is in the month, if it was in the middle of the month and whatnot. And then you would take that from you would count these days and take it from that last of them to finish it, to finish off to be 3 months complete. And then you have 2 months, and then you would count off the rest of what was left in that month and put it to the other one. So that'd be 3 complete months. And this is the iddah for him. And so this is for those who are either they're young and they don't have periods, or they're menopausal, or if it's just a woman who doesn't have periods whatsoever. There's some women who have medical issues as well. They don't have periods. And in this case, this would be 3 months, and we call it that. And then he says here, وَالْمُطَلَّقَةُ أَنْ قَبْلَ الدُّخُولِ بِهَا لَا عِدَّةَ عَلَيْهَا. And so the woman who is divorced before she is entered in upon, like before the marriage is consummated, if she is divorced before the marriage is consummated, فَلَيْسَ لَكُمْ عَلَيْهَا مِنْ عِدَّةٍ تَعْتَدُّونَهَا. And so like then there's no iddah that is upon her in this case. And so and فَمَا لَكُمْ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ عِدَّةٍ تَعْتَدُّونَهَا. This is the ayah that it comes with in Surah Ahzab, where it talks about that you don't have any iddah when it comes to her, because you didn't enter in upon her. And so the iddah here, yes, she's mutallaqa, but right away she could get married. There's no iddah for her because they haven't even consummated, so they haven't created that bond before each other. And this is like of the benefits of the iddah. There's multiple benefits of the iddah. Of them is like that this makes sure that the nasab is clear. Like, so that when you have 3 times of purity, or even 1 time of purity, that does the job. But 3 times of purity, there's a time between the menses, which makes someone assured that this woman is not pregnant with someone else's baby before she gets married to someone else. So this is of the wisdom of the iddah. Of course, there's a wisdom that we don't necessarily understand. Why is it 3 months? When this can be done with a single period. A single period could do this. So there's a level of ta'abbud here, which is something that maybe we don't know all of the wisdom behind this. But also of that extra period of time gives the man a time to think about his decision. And if it's a raj'i, like if it's the type where he still can take her back, he gets a time of period of waiting to where he can take her back right away. And this is of course a benefit of the iddah as well. But for this woman who had never been her marriage has not been consummated, then she's not even like held to this person in this case, and so she has no iddah that is upon her for her to wait before she can get married again. And and like technically she would still be a bikr if she was a bikr before and he never entered in upon her. She's still a bikr, like she's still a virgin, even if she is considered a mutallaqa. And so the next thing that he says after this, he's going to talk about the iddah for al-amah, which is the slave girl. And he says, the وَعِدَّةُ الْأَمَةِ بِالْحَمْلِ. And so the same thing, anyone who's pregnant, their iddah ends with whenever they give birth. And this is also of there's a benefit where you'll never have to, while she is carrying another man's child, she's not going to be in a relationship with a man, like a different man other than him. There'll never be this situation here. And so there'll never be like a mix of two different, like ma'ain will never mix. And so once she gives the birth, then this would be the end of her iddah. He says, وَعِدَّةُ الْأَمَةِ بِالْحَمْلِ كَعِدَّةِ الْحُرَّةِ. And so he says, and if she's pregnant, then it would be with giving the birth, just like the free woman. And then he says here, وَبِالْأَقْرَاءِ أَنْ تَعْتَدْ بِقُرْءٍ. And so, and if it's with, say she's not pregnant, then the free woman has three periods that she would do. All right, and so how do we break up 3 in half? And normally the abid, normally all of the things for like slaves will always be half of what is upon the free person. So it's going to be half. So how do we break up 3 into half? We finished it over. Just like if you have, so here to get 3, we'd say that instead of we're going to break 3 into half, so we have 1 1/2. And this half, we're going to complete it with a whole, because it should be all of it. And so then he completes it with a whole, and so that's 2. That's where it comes up with 2 instead of qur'ain. And so then she would finish it off with 2 periods of purity beforehand that she would get before she could get married again. And so he also says here, وَبِالشُّهُورِ عَنِ الْوَفَاءِ. And then for if, say she was of the person where she's a widow, in this case, then if she was a widow, in this case, the same thing as before. If she had a hamil, it would be the same thing for the hamil. But if she was widowed in this case, he says وَبِالشُّهُورِ عَنِ الْوَفَاءِ أَنْ تَعْتَدْ بِشَهْرَيْنِ وَخَمْسِ لَيَالٍ. And so then, we had 4 months for the free woman, was 4 months, 10 days. So she's going to have 2 months, شهرين وخمس ليال. And so she's going to have 2 months and 5 nights. And nights is the same in Arab. The Arabs will use the word layalin, and what they mean is the day and the night together. They like we say normally in English, we'd say days, how many days, and we mean the daytime and the nighttime is one day. And they would use the word layl as the same thing. Like when they say layalin, a lot of times they would mean that this is the day and the night together, and they use the night, and the night comes first. Like the day starts with maghrib, like that's when the day starts with the night, and then it comes out, and it ends at the end of asr. And then starts off with the beginning of Maghrib, that's the beginning. So it'd be khamsa layalin, this is like 5 days and nights. And he says, وَعَنِ الطَّلَاقِ أَن تَعْتَدْ بِشَهْرٍ وَنِصْفٍ. And so here, he says here, and if she is of the people that she doesn't have hayd, and she's going to be doing it with the time period that's allotted. In this case, if she was divorced, then she would do the iddah and ta'tadda bishahrin wa nisf. Then it'd be, we had 3 months. So what's half of 3 months? We can easily do the math here, which is 1 month, 15 days. And so, all right. So this is shahr wa nisf. And this is what he gives. And he says, فَإِنْ اعْتَدَّتْ بِشَهْرَيْنِ كَانَ أَوْلَى. And so like some of the scholars said that it's better for her to do it with 2, because like breaking into half, as we mentioned before with the tuhur. So we have like the waqt of that she's going to be pure. This is like, how do we break this in half? We can't break this in half. This we can break in half because it's a shahr. But to be like the other one, we'd just say finish it off with 2. And so this is better. And of course, like what will do it for her is 1 month and 15 days. But as far as saying that, is she allowed, is it better for her to do it with 2 months? Because some of the other people said that this is what is obligatory. In this case, this is better to leave the difference of opinion here. And it's closer, and it's similar to the other view. It's similar to the other view, and that's why they would say it needs to be 2 months for her. Instead of being 1 month and a half, because how are you going to get a half? And this also just makes it unclear for her and whatnot. But of course, it's enough for her to do 1 month and a half. This is okay, and this will use it. this is okay for her. Any other questions before we move on to the next chapter? Talk about some of the other ahkam for a woman while she's in that waiting period. All right, and we'll try to catch up with this before we go into Maghrib. But he says here, فصل ويجب للمعتدة الرجعية السكنى والنفقة. And so for the mu'tadda, that is raj'iyya. He mentions this raj'iyya, as opposed to the mu'tadda, who is the one who's in the waiting period, that is raj'iyya, where she's still under, basically she can be taken back. She hasn't been divorced 3 times yet, and she's still in this waiting period, so she can be taken back as a wife at any time, and she still technically is a wife. Like, even though she's in the waiting period, once the waiting period ends, then she is no longer a wife. But she still has a lot of the rulings of a wife. So he says here, يجب للمعتدة الرجعية السكنى والنفقة. And so the sukna, which is the living, like her, this is of the rights of a wife, to have a place to live that is proper for her. So she has the right to a place of living, as well as nafaqah, as well as her nafaqah, that is like for her food, like for her eating, as well as we'll talk about in the bab al-nafaqah, which is to come, inshallah, as well as like the clothes for her to wear for each season and whatnot. And this nafaqah and the place of residence, this is obligatory for the husband to provide for her, even while she's in this time of waiting period. This is assuming that she's not nashiza. If she's nashiza, then she doesn't have to have the nafaqah. Which we'll talk. I think we talked about nushuz, which is basically it's when the wife leaves the obedience of the husband, and like say she refuses to give the husband his rights as a husband from a wife in this case, or she leaves the house without his permission, or some of these other acts of like deliberate disobedience from what is not her right to refuse. In this case, she would be nashiza, and she would not be entitled to the nafaqah. But if she was not nashiza, and then in this case the nafaqah would be her right. He says here, وَيَجِبُ لِلْبَائِنِ السُّكْنَى دُونَ النَّفَقَةِ. And the ba'in is like the one who is separated completely. This woman is not coming back to this man. The first one we talked about is the mu'tadda raj'iyya. This is the one who's on her waiting period, but she's still able to be taken back. She's still like she's still a wife to this man, like with most of the rulings, even though once the time ends, if he doesn't take her back, then she's no longer going to be his wife. It ends at that time. But here, for the ba'in is the opposite. She's been normally ba'in would refer to the one who's been, she's been divorced 3 times now. She's in 3 strikes. And so she's been divorced 3 times, she's not coming back to this man. And similar, and so like in this case, the ba'in, which is not going to come back, she's been divorced 3 times. She still has the right to the sukna while she's in her iddah, like the sukna, which is her residence. She has the right to the residence while she's on her iddah. He says duna nafaqah, but she doesn't have a right to the nafaqah. And this comes in a hadith that talks about this issue, which was clear for that. And then he says here, إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ حَامِلًا, except that she would be hamid. Like if she is pregnant, in this case, this man is not just doing something, there's still a relationship, as in he is providing for this son, which is his, or like his kid, that is also in her belly. So in this case, he needs to provide for that. And this also comes in the ayah in Surah Al-Talaq, where Allah says, وَأَسْكِنُوهُنَّ مِنْ حَيْثُ سَكَنْتُم مِّن وُجْدِكُمْ وَلَا تُضَارُّونَهُنَّ لِتُضَيِّقُوا عَلَيْهِنْ. And so like وَأَسْكِنُوهُنَّ min haythu sakantum, like to give them that sukna, that placement of living, min wajdikum, and also don't harm them and whatnot. In this, wa anfiqu alayhinna hatta yad'na hamlahun, and this is also in the when kunna ulatu hamlin fa anfiqu alayhinna hatta yad'na hamlahun. If they were of the people who are ulatu hamlin, that these are women who are bearing children, then you give them the nafaqah, anfiqu alayhin hatta yad'na hamlahun, so then give them the nafaqah until they bear the children, and this is what is obligatory on the men in this case. And so also like a usuli benefit is like in the chapters of talaq, or in the surah al-talaq, there's multiple ayat, such as this ayah and the ayah before it, that are there's no takhsis done on these ayat. Like there's no, normally with the ayat of ahkam and whatnot, there's usually takhsis that will come from other places that will affect the ruling of it. But these are ayat, especially the one that wallahi, the wallahi ya'isna min, so like this particular ayat, there's no takhsis that can be done to it. It is the thing that is muhkam in a certain way. Like it gives the ruling for everything else, and no ruling affects this ayah, which is a very rare thing, and like from a usuli perspective when it comes to dalil. And so going back to what he says here, so there's the three type of women. So we have the woman who is raj'iyya, to review. The woman who is raj'iyya, she gets the sukna and the nafaqah. So she gets the sukna, which is the residence, and also the spending upon her, which will be talked about in the next coming chapter. And then also for the person who is not raj'iyya, and she's ba'in, then in this case she gets the sukna but not the nafaqah, unless she is pregnant. Then she would get the nafaqah as well. And all of them get the sukna until their iddah is finished, which is the residence. And so we'll stop here so that we can go pray Maghrib, and inshallah we'll come in after Maghrib, probably in like 20 minutes and whatnot, and we'll finish up these chapters. Inshallah we'll come up into Kitab al-Jinayat inshallah today. وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Any questions before we go and come back? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك.